My name is Peter Walsh and I'm the Chief Executive of the patient safety charity Action Against Medical Accidents, also known as AVMA for short.
Hello Peter, thank you so much for talking to me today. Can you please put Connor Sparrowhawk's case in the context of the work that you do here at AVMA?
Yes, it's a great shame that Connor's family weren't made aware of my charity, because it's a perfect example of where my charity can provide much needed support at a time of great stress and trauma for a family. Not all of the people who come to AVMA for support have suffered a bereavement. Sometimes patients themselves who've suffered harm contact us. We provide a free helpline where specially trained medico-legal advisors can help people come to terms with what's happened, explain some of the medical terminology, and help them get the answers they need to understand A, what went wrong and why, and B, what can be done about it, both in terms of their own rights and also in terms of improving things for other people, which the vast majority of people who come to us want to see as quite a high priority.
In your experience, do you find that people with learning disabilities are more at risk of, say, patient safety issues than others?
We have relatively few cases that come to us that directly relate to the care of people with learning disabilities. I think that's one of the issues, actually, that I suspect people with learning disabilities themselves and even their families lack knowledge, lack awareness of where they should go to for independent help and advice if something does go wrong. And the relevant bodies who provide services for people with learning disabilities are probably not as well advanced as some other areas of the NHS, for example, where quite routinely now people are told about us so that people can come to us for independent advice, support, and sometimes a second opinion.
And why, in your opinion, are people with learning disabilities getting such a raw deal from the health service and social care?
Inherently, some people with learning disabilities, particularly with severe learning disabilities, are not going to be as able as the average person, A, to make assessments of the risks and the alternatives to treatments that they're having proposed or that they're receiving, or secondly, to know what to do if something goes wrong and to make a judgment about whether something has gone wrong. In fact, most of the people we deal with have difficulty with some of those questions, which is why there's a need for a specialist service like ours. There's also a problem, of course, with actual access to services. In our experience, both with people with learning disabilities and other people who lack capacity, for example, some areas in mental health care, people are not having all of their needs met. People are treating the most apparent symptom and not looking after their overall health needs. And a recurrent problem, certainly in the field of mental health and in some of the learning disability cases in which we've been involved, a lack of sufficient supervision of people who have underlying health problems and who are therefore vulnerable has led to avoidable harm and all too often avoidable death.
We've known since at least a report published in 2010 that people with learning disabilities die earlier than people without learning disabilities. And we know that one of the common and preventable causes of death is epilepsy. So why do you think services aren't paying particular attention to people with diagnosis of epilepsy?
Well, with people with learning disability, to begin with, I think the whole area of service provision is still treated as somewhat of a Cinderella service. It's not given high priority because the seriousness of the implications for people with learning disabilities as a patient safety issue hasn't been given enough weight. It's 2005 that we remember the National Patient Safety Agency published a report on the common patient safety issues faced by people with learning disabilities. There have, of course, been quite a number of tragedies, some large-scale scandals, such as Winterbourne View, and there have been reports written. So things we feel are beginning to change. There's increased awareness of the need to do something, but I'm afraid the pace of change has been lamentably slow.
And how would you recommend that we make provision for this population safer?
I think learning disability services need to be given greater priority. I think fragmentation of the services, as has happened with various parts of the NHS, isn't helpful. But to have a centre of excellence, if you like, looking at the needs for people with learning disabilities, and also, quite frankly, something central dedicated to patient safety, which we used to have in the form of the National Patient Safety Agency. And I do think that had we had a National Patient Safety Agency, some of those issues that were recognised in 2005 would have been developed and worked upon, and we'd be talking about solutions to some of the patient safety problems that people with learning disabilities experience, rather than exposing scandals, which is all too often what we find ourselves doing at the moment.
And why does it, I'm just following on from that, why does it seemingly take scandals and catastrophic events, Minster Staffordshire, Winterbourne View, Connor's death, to bring appalling behaviour to light?
That's a very difficult question. Why is it that scandals and subsequent investigations are needed, and why aren't the services doing more of what they should be doing right now? Of course, as with any patient safety issue, there's a whole range of factors. One is awareness of the needs and the particular vulnerabilities of people with learning disabilities. The priority given to learning disability services, and of course with priority comes resources, so sufficient numbers of appropriately trained and qualified staff. What we saw at Winterbourne View, for example, was that there were poorly trained and unqualified and poorly supervised staff. The fragmentation of services, so having a plethora of privately managed service providers whose major incentive is profit as opposed to service delivery, means that there's less potential for a joined up and consistent approach to quality and safety in the provision of services.
In this country, we have a very rigorous and robust framework for investigating maternal deaths. The confidential maternal death inquiry has been running for over 60 years and has contributed to reducing maternal deaths. Do you think we should have something similar for the learning disabled people who die in the care of the health service or social care?
I do think that there should be a system of investigating deaths in services for people with learning disabilities, similar to that which we've had in maternal deaths, where the investigations, the independent investigation and oversight of a range of deaths has led to very important learning and a reduction in maternal deaths. We certainly should have inquests into the deaths of people with learning disabilities where it's related to the services they provide. And for inquests to work properly, there has to be a guarantee of suitable representation and expert evidence in the inquest itself, but representation for the family, whereas almost inevitably the service provider and related health or social care professionals will be represented at an inquest by their lawyers.
And what's the position for families legally at the moment in terms of representation at inquests? Representation
at inquests is very, very difficult to come by for families, unless of course they're wealthy and they can afford without any worries to pay for quite expensive legal fees to have a legal team represent them, or unless there's a prima facie claim for clinical negligence. If there is a prima facie claim, many solicitors will take on the representation at the inquest in the confidence that they should be able to reclaim the costs at a later stage when they've settled the case. However, if there isn't an obvious claim, some families are left in a situation where they simply have to rely on the coroner to do their best to ask and decide upon the right questions, and it's not a level playing field. We try and breach that gap and create a level playing field wherever we can in healthcare related inquests, and we would certainly prioritise cases where there's been a death related to care of people with learning disabilities. We already have considerable experience of representing people in inquests of people who've been under the care of mental health services. And of course, they're different services, different kinds of people and conditions. However, there are many similarities looking at the care and the supervision of people who lack capacity.
So what would your advice be to the worried parents of children and young adults with learning disabilities who are taken into care and are being cared for in health and social care services?
My advice to any families who have relatives who are being cared for, who have learning disabilities, is to ask as many questions as they need to feel confident that their loved one is going to receive the quality of care that they need and they deserve, to become involved as much as they can do in the running of the home, if it is a home, or the service, if it's a service, and not be timid about demanding appropriate quality and safety of services. To be aware of sources of independent help, relevant charities like MENCAP, the availability of the Care Quality Commission, which is the regulator of most of these services, to tell them about any concerns that they have. And again, not to be timid about any serious concerns they have, to try and make sure that they're looked into. And if something is felt to have gone wrong, to turn to people like us who can explain people's rights, help them through the tangled web of confusing medical and medico-legal terminology, and help them get the answers that they need and deserve.
So you're dealing with bereaved parents and relatives on a daily basis. What support do you think that they should be offered as routine in the aftermath of a loss?
Well, after the loss, in healthcare-related context, it's really vitally important that people are given time, that they're given supportive explanations about whatever is known about the circumstances in which the death has occurred. It's vitally important that there's openness and honesty whenever anything's gone wrong and caused harm. One positive development that we've helped achieve this year is that there will, from the 1st of October, be a statutory duty of candour. That's a legal duty on anyone registered, any healthcare provider registered with the Care Quality Commission, or for that matter, social care services. If something goes wrong in that service and causes harm, there's a legal statutory obligation to be open and honest with the family. People need that honesty. They also need to be pointed in the direction of people who can provide independent help and support. For example, counselling services may be appropriate, but also the kind of advice and support that my charity provides to explain to people what their rights are, what different forms of investigations are open to them, how they can get specialist help and support or representation, for example, at an inquest. These are all things that we can help with, and where we don't have the answers or the appropriate service, we can often refer people to people who can.